The conference room lights cast a cold, stone-like light over the wooden table. I stood at one end, drew a measured breath, and heard my heartbeat slow. Opposite was Carter Lang, my husband, the CEO, his collar stiff like the border of a photograph. At his shoulder was Sloane Avery, who had taken the seat I built over 8 years, her hand resting on the laptop as if used to hitting send in place of thinking. I spoke before anyone could cut me off. "I'm not here to take back my seat. I'm here to talk about shareholder risk." My voice sounded flat, free of excess emotion. On the screen appeared exactly 3 lines, enough to change the room's temperature. Churn rate up 18.7% in the 90 days of Sloane's interim tenure. NPS down 21 points. Email from Horizon Freight at 12:17 p.m. "We will only work with Morgan, otherwise, review the contract." Carter folded his arms, the look of, "You're overreacting." Then he spoke in the voice that had made countless crises look like a transition slide. "Are you dramatizing the transition period?" I didn't look at him. I projected the metadata of a batch of strategic documents. A handover doesn't change the author on 17 files, yet here, it did. Sloane cleared her throat, trying to paint over the crack. "We work nights." I tilted my head, letting the question drop cleanly. "Then, ROI?" The leather chairs creaked softly. No one spoke. I moved to the risk map. Clients flagged yellow, SLA milestones sliding off the line, calls being postponed with the excuse, internal fine-tuning. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply put the numbers in the light and let them do the hardest part themselves. The chair of the board tapped the tip of his pen on the table, then looked to counsel. "Suspend interim approval authority. Open an internal investigation." The pen hitting wood sounded like a bolt sliding shut. I closed my notebook, put the pen away. In my mind, the scene from 3 days earlier in Minneapolis replayed. I, Morgan Ellis, stood in the kitchen, hand on the cold stone counter, promising myself I would leave a marriage and a company not out of wounded pride, but because the data said so. Tonight, in this room bright as day, the data had spoken. I stepped back half a beat, looked straight at the part of my life ahead and thought, they thought I would swallow humiliation. They were wrong. I will take the clients and the ethics with me. A Thursday afternoon with the smell of cold coffee in the conference room, a phone screen lit in Carter's hand, and one sentence that pushed me off the old tracks. 3 days before the data bomb, I learned how to quietly swallow a stab in the back, then chose to let the truth speak for me. The conference room at 4:30 is always overly cold, the air conditioning blasting straight at the nape of your neck, so you're as alert as if doused in ice water. I brought a deck I'd revised 11 times, clearly labeling each quarterly objective, each conversion milestone, risk contingencies, financial bandwidth. I had rehearsed my opening line to an even rhythm. "I'm ready to present the promotion roadmap." Carter didn't look up, his fingers still swiping the screen as if cradling a tiny world only he could see. He dropped a sentence as lightly as tossing a scrap of paper. "Promotion? I've given it to Sloane." Beth from HR rushed to cut in, her voice as neutral as an answering machine. "You're not on the consideration list." Next to Carter, Sloane sat upright, hair in a neat bun, a thin smile, a soft voice that's hard to fault. "I forgot to tell you." In the brief silence between the word "forgot" and the word "tell," I heard something inside me snap softly like a pencil twig. I didn't argue. I didn't tally 8 years of building the entire customer care framework. Didn't mention the holidays worked through. Didn't pull out any old thank you email as proof. I took out a pen, opened my notebook, and wrote a single line, round and steady. "Handover today. All changes to be signed by Sloane." When people want you silent, the most courteous thing is to let the data tell the truth. When the meeting ended, I walked down the long hallway lined with glossy awards I'd never stood within the frame of. The elevator dropped smoothly to the lobby floor. I caught my cheekbones tense in the mirror, but my eyes weren't red. That afternoon in Minneapolis, the air was windless. Old snow crusted into gray, edging along the curb. I drove home, hands still at 12 o'clock on the wheel out of habit, like steering a vessel that doesn't need showiness. The kitchen lights were warm, the smell of roast chicken lingering from lunch. Carter leaned against the counter, shirt collar open, his eyes still carrying the chill of the conference room, and said as if reading a photo caption, "I did it for our image." I opened the cabinet for a glass, set it on the cool stone, poured water, and answered succinctly, "Image doesn't feed a business. What holds a company up is the P&L." He raised his eyebrows, then shrugged, as if the problem were that I didn't understand storytelling. Lily, my daughter, came into the kitchen with a knit hat pulled down over her ears, set her phone on the table, and looked at me for a long moment. "Mom, are you okay?" I rested my hand on the back of hers and squeezed lightly. "I'm okay, and I'll be very busy." She nodded, asked nothing more, knowing I don't hide what needs to be said from her, and not wanting me to burst into tears and have to apologize for being weak. Carter flicked his hand as if shooing a mosquito. "Don't turn a small thing into a campaign." I leaned over to switch off the range hood and said slowly, as if stacking dishes on the right shelf, "A small thing. Is it?" "Noted." He smiled, the smile of someone used to standing in the stage lights. "Suit yourself." When the bedroom door closed, I opened my laptop on the kitchen counter, set beside it a black notebook and a red felt tip. I didn't smash anything, didn't call a friend to swear, didn't write a long status. I opened a notes page and bullet-pointed a counter checklist. A plan for someone who doesn't want to shout. Item 1. Export all emails related to product roadmap, key accounts, pricing decisions. Download the access permission change logs from the admin system. Record the version history of the 17 strategic files, whose every line I know. If someone has altered the author metadata, I'll have the time, date, and account. Item 2. Create a hash for the current chain of files. Lock the contents to a string of characters so any edits leave tracks. I'm not someone who adores technical jargon. I just need a clear border so no one can shrug and say, "You misremember." Item 3. Compile the primary contacts for each account. Decision maker, influencer, KPIs set by both sides, current SLAs, pain points they've shared in reviews. For any name whose mobile number I haven't saved, I call the responsible person politely and say a single sentence. I want to record how we've worked well together. Item 4. Download customer satisfaction data for the past 2 quarters. Capture the NPS chart before and after the day Sloan took over as interim. Item 5. Note the missed touch points. Emails left 48 hours without reply. Meeting reschedule requests sent late at night. I don't argue. I reconstruct the truth with digital trace. Between bullet points, I stood and brewed a pot of tea, letting the hot water spill peppermint aroma over the counter to clear my head. A sentence ran through my mind like a signboard hung over a playing field. Don't argue when the other person is performing. Let the system tell the truth. I sent myself a draft email titled Day Zero Script, with only 3 lines inside. Lock the numbers, lock the customer's voice, no grudges. On the counter, my phone buzzed. A message from Sloan. "Hey, I need you to transfer ownership of a few dashboards tomorrow." I'm not very familiar. I looked at the screen and went still for a beat. I replied, "Okay." One word, no exclamation, no emoji. I knew I'd just flipped a switch. From here on out, every change would bear her signature. When someone is eager to hold the pen, let them sign long enough for their handwriting to show. I reopened the Key Accounts folder and clicked Horizon Freight, a name like a band of orange sky in my mind because they once saved us in a hard quarter. I reread their noon email. We will only work with Morgan. Otherwise, review the contract. I felt no glee. My heartbeat steadied. Everything will eventually be called by its right name. I took a screenshot, dropped it into the board-ready folder, and noted 12:17 p.m. Tone: firm, clear. Next came 3 other clients, not as blunt as Horizon, but enough to sketch a subtle downward curve. Please postpone the demo. Need more technical staff. We'd like to sit with Morgan to review milestones. I packed the pieces like packing a suitcase. Neat. In the right place. Just so. For people, I wrote down 3 quiet names who always work on time. Kevin in Ops, Priya in Analytics, and May in Customer Care. I sent each of them a short message without pulling them into it. Need the timestamp you log each time Sloan asks to edit a file this week. Please send me the raw NPS before it goes onto the dashboard. If there's any email where a client mentions reply delays, forward it to me. They answered with a tidy, yes, no question marks. I don't want anyone standing in the crossfire. I just want the markers so the system can follow its proper path. Carter walked past the kitchen, glanced at the files open on my screen, and snorted. Don't make life hard for yourself. I folded the laptop, turned my palm up on the stone. I'm making the future easy. He walked away, shoulders straight like a man stepping onto stage on cue. I heard the study door close, a small sound but final. Lily opened the fridge for a carton of milk, looked at me through the door, and said softly, "If you need anything, tell me." I nodded, laid a hand on her hair. "Thank you. I just need you to go to bed early." When the house was quiet, I reopened the list and added, "Let the numbers speak." I wrote 3 lines for the board meeting. I'm not asking for my rollback. I'm presenting shareholder risk. A handover doesn't change the author. So, ROI? I practiced them under my breath so they would flow without a hitch. I don't want to become someone who complains. I want to be the person who puts the numbers on the table under the right lights. Night deepened, Minneapolis covered by a grainy silence. In the warm-lit kitchen, I signed the printed contact list, slipped it into a folder, labeled it Day 1. I sent Beth a short email, confirming handover to Sloan as requested. Attached is the access matrix. I CC'd Carter so no one could say I worked against the grain. Then I dimmed the lights, leaving only the kitchen lamp. Before bed, I stood at the window looking out at the alley, the snow reflecting the streetlights into a gentle plain. I told myself, tomorrow is too. We won't fight. We'll rebuild the path. The next morning, I arrived early and activated the transfers on the dashboards. Each time I clicked Transfer Ownership, I grabbed a screenshot with time and saved it to the folder. Sloan sent a thank you icon. I didn't reply. I sat down to finish the Customer Pain Points sheet using the template I designed. Where it's slow, where it hits rigid process, where people need a real human to hear them. By noon, I received a clarification email from Sloan to the entire department. From now on, all pricing package decisions are approved by me. I nodded. Good. The clearer it is, the less room there is for selective amnesia. On day 2nd evening, Carter said he was dining with a group of investors. I had dinner with Lily, put on a light movie, but my mind kept running the list. I added one last item, contain the emotions. I wouldn't let myself flare up and flame out. I built a small fire just warm enough, the certainty that I'm not wrong for demanding the truth. Before sleeping, I read Horizon's email once more on my phone, then smiled very slightly to myself. In a country that respects contracts, sometimes you only need to bring the contract into the light. On day 3, I printed everything needed for the meeting: churn charts, NPS, email excerpts, author change logs. I stacked them in a black folder, clipped a pen neatly. At noon, I sent a polite message to the chair of the board, requesting 15 minutes for risk review. I'll be brief. He replied, "Approved," with an hourglass emoji. The small detail made me smile. It felt like setting a solid cornerstone into place. That last night, I turned off my phone at 10, hugged Lily a little tighter than usual. She whispered, "Will you be on a video call?" I shook my head. "I'll be home on time." I knew I would be, whether that room was loud or quiet, because I wasn't going in to reclaim a seat. I was going in to put the seat in its rightful place, and if that place was no longer mine, I'd install another seat elsewhere, taking the numbers, the clients, and a way of speaking like a normal human, low on noise, clear enough. 3 days later, when the chair tapped his pen, I was ready to close the notebook. But on this Thursday afternoon, in my kitchen, I truly opened another one, the contingency book. It has no sensational twists, only tidy lines. Don't argue, reconstruct the truth with digital trace. And once you hold the traces firmly, you don't need to shout. You only need to pull the curtain so the light can step in. After the night of day 1, when I chose to stay silent and let the numbers lead, on the morning of day 2, I woke earlier than usual, opened my to-do list, and decided to start where there would be the least argument: the bank. Money will say what needs to be said without any added opinions. I arrived at the VIP client area at exactly 8:30. The space was quiet, the glass spotless, the leather chairs neatly arranged. I sat across from Diana Ruiz, the financial advisor in charge of our group. I stated my needs clearly, without circling around. I need 36 months of statements for the related accounts, including the joint credit card and any authorized cards. I also need to open an individual account under my birth name, and I'd like copies of expenses from the company representation fund that were approved under Carter's signature. Diana nodded, opened her computer, verified my identity, then scrolled through the transaction lines. She paused at a series of repeating items. Here are Wellness, St. Regis, a few dinners at Romano's, and a string of consulting, B. Hale. She said evenly, "I see this kind of legitimization a lot. It's usually described as partner hospitality or after-hours consulting." I didn't comment. I only said, "Print those items for me with the payment authentication chain. Time, card used, approver. I also need the last 3 quarters declarations with Carter's signature." Diana nodded and submitted an internal request. I signed to open the individual account, set up transaction alerts, and restricted access for transfers that lack clear notes. "I'll send the electronic copies today," she said. "The printed set will be ready before 3 p.m. I thanked her, took the account opening receipt, and left. Stepping out onto the sidewalk, I texted Margaret, the attorney, one line: "Bank statements, in progress. Authentication chain requested." At noon on day 2, I returned to the company building. The lobby had 2 lanes of doors. The doorman and security team rotated as usual. I met Tom Alvarez at the access control desk, someone who's worked here long enough to know every late-hour face. I asked directly, keeping my voice low, "Tom, I need to check the entry logs to the executive floor on Saturday nights around 11 p.m. for roughly the past 7 weeks. Tom glanced at his shift calendar, tapped a few keys, then looked up. "It's all recorded. 11 p.m. Priority elevator straight to the executive floor." Repeated 7 weeks in a row. I said, You can redact your name from any documents. I only need the log and timestamps. If an official request is needed, my attorney will send it. Tom nodded. Let the data take point. I'll hold a temporary copy until legal processes it. I thanked him and didn't ask more so as not to put him in a bind. Before leaving the desk, I received an internal notification that the lobby camera footage had been preserved per the data hold request Margaret sent this morning. I acknowledged receipt. I spent the rest of the lunchtime on human evidence. I didn't pull anyone in to badmouth anyone else. I chose only people who had worked long enough and understood the numbers well enough not to speak emotionally. I met Priya, our former finance director, at a cafe across from the park. We sat at a table by the window. I stated my purpose briefly. I need to reconcile figures, nothing more. Priya opened her laptop, pulled up an old spreadsheet and 2 reconciliation files. The pretty numbers a few quarters back came from pushing costs between departments, she said. Here are the accounting reconciliations with timestamps. If someone looks closely, they'll see partner service costs were shifted to a different cost center code. I received the digital files via USB and photographed the screen with timestamps. Thank you, I said. I'll use them properly. Priya nodded. I'm not joining any litigation, but numbers here are numbers. After that, I moved to another cafe. Jonah, who used to handle strategy, arrived with a stack of emails printed from his personal inbox. I don't keep much, he prefaced, but I do have a few email threads showing Sloan requesting creative briefs. In reality, the core writing was done by the old team. He handed me emails with clear subjects and full sender / recipient fields. I flipped through the pages and saw requests to tweak wording and to put a new name at the top of the documents. I noted, source, X strategy, content, assignment of writing and edits. I thanked him and promised to redact all personal information when submitting to the board. The third meeting was with Sandra, formerly operations manager. We sat in a small diner and ordered 2 soups. I left the company because the company card was used for personal expenses, she said bluntly. These are the statements from that time. There are purchases not belonging to work categories. Carter approved them. I reported internally but got no response. I reviewed the pages and cross-checked dates with the event calendar. I wrote in my notebook, source, X ops, evidence, card statements, approver. I paid for lunch. Sandra declined. I left a higher than usual tip and said only one sentence. Thank you for being clear. By mid-afternoon, when enough pieces had appeared to sketch an overall frame, my phone rang. The display showed Harold Benton, a board member I respect because he speaks little and tends to ask exactly the right questions. I stepped outside to the sidewalk to avoid the cafe noise. I've reviewed part of what you sent preliminarily, he said. You should read the intimate relationships section of the internal code carefully. There's a clause about conflicts of interest and using company assets for non-work purposes. Record everything. No need to notify the executive team before Monday. We need time to align. I replied briefly, understood. I'll document everything. I won't send the full packet to the executive side before the board receives it. Harold gave no further instruction. He only said, don't let anyone drag you into personal arguments. Present it strictly as shareholder risk. I said yes, then hung up. I went to a nearby co-working space and rented a small meeting room for 3 hours. I laid the materials out on the table and sorted them into 3 groups: financial, operational numbers, human evidence, legal guidelines, and internal procedures. I opened the board-ready folder on my laptop and dragged files into each subsection. Group 1 included the bank statements from Diana, the list of expenses labeled wellness, consulting, dinners, with authentication codes and approvers. The executive floor Saturday night entry logs from Tom with timestamps, churn charts, and weekly satisfaction indices. Group 2 included Jonah's emails showing creative brief authorship, Priya's reconciliation documents about shifting costs between cost centers, and Sandra's corporate card statements. Group 3 included excerpts of the internal policies Harold mentioned, items on relationships that may pose conflicts, rules for using company assets, and the reporting procedures to the board. I wrote a one-page summary titled Shareholder Risk Sequoia Overview. Under the title were 4 items: revenue risk due to key clients requiring specific working conditions, reputational risk due to non-purpose spending, compliance risk due to loose approval processes, operational risk due to changed authorship and unclear accountability. Each item had 2 to 3 lines of evidence with source documents. I didn't use emotive terms. I wrote the exact document names, exact times, exact signatories. I added a temporary recommendation section. Temporarily suspend the interim approver's authority until the investigation concludes. Request internal audit to engage. Independently verify the expenses and related relationships to avoid conflicts of interest. Restore the prior standard for customer response within 30 days. While I was organizing, Diana emailed that the printed packet was ready, with the electronic files time-stamped. I downloaded them, checked each page, and cross-checked against the list of expenses I'd noted in the morning. The St. Regis and Romano's transactions matched Tom's late-night executive floor logs by date. I added a log match column to the master table. Priya texted that she'd sent an additional chart of departmental cost allocation. I dragged it into Group 1. Sandra sent a screenshot of Carter's approval email for a personal expense. I placed it in Group 2 and labeled it Approval Trail. Toward the end of the afternoon, Harold sent a short message. Receive the one-pager. Keep the structure. See you first thing Monday. I replied, understood. I packed the paper files into a hard folder, labeled by group, and placed them in a document bag. Before leaving the room, I wrote one line in my notebook as a self-check. Frontline numbers sufficient, witness backing secured. Legal pointers clear. Keep a neutral tone, no personal commentary. On the evening of day 2, I got home in time for dinner. Lily asked, "Are you still busy?" I said, "I've finished today's portion." I washed my hands, set the table, and told her what I needed to do the next morning in the simplest way. I'll put the papers in front of the people who need to see them. The rest is for process to handle. Carter didn't ask anything. He sent a few messages, then went into the study. I didn't follow him. I went upstairs, set the document bag by the door, checked the list one last time, and turned off the light. Day 2 ended neatly. Day 3 would be for presenting to the board and sending scheduling emails. The picture was now sharp enough to stand on its own. Numbers, people, and rules. I didn't need more words. I just needed to be on time. After organizing the documents for the board and finalizing the list of materials, I looked back at the calendar on my phone and realized the gap from late afternoon on day 2 to night was enough for me to decide 2 things: where I would work starting Monday, and how I would state the facts publicly without dragging anyone into personal arguments. Late on day 2, I received a call from Marcus Hale, CEO of North River Partners in Denver. Marcus got straight to the point, his voice firm and clear. "We're offering you a director role. Track to VP in 6 months based on results. Equity included if you bring in 3 strategic accounts in the first quarter." I didn't ask for time to consider. I had prepared for this moment before everything came to light. I said, "I'll start Monday." Marcus finalized the working conditions. The first week in Denver to onboard processes, then a hybrid schedule in Minneapolis and Denver based on client calendars. No emails after 8 p.m., unless it's a classified incident. Authority to shape the team within the approved budget framework. conflict of interest policy spelled out in the contract. I requested the terms be put in writing regarding the right to present data directly to the executive team when there is risk, without going through middle layers. Marcus agreed and said he'd send the official offer within 2 hours. The call lasted 15 minutes, with no extra fluff. I texted Margaret. North River offer. Director, track to VP in 6 months. Equity conditional. E-sign tonight. She replied, ready to review terms. I spent 45 minutes reviewing the proposal. Base salary was market appropriate, performance bonus was clear, equity tied to revenue milestones and retention. Termination clause was fair, with outplacement support if the company restructured. The non-compete was reasonably limited by region and clientele. I sent back 2 minor edits. Confirmation of the right to keep copies of my personal work that contains no confidential information, and the right to decline after-hours meetings if not part of a classified urgent incident. North River HR responded quickly, updating them in Appendix A. I signed at 6:20 p.m. and received the confirmation email at 6:23 p.m. I printed a copy to put in a separate file folder labeled New Contract. On the evening of day 2, I opened my personal computer and wrote a short analysis on LinkedIn. I titled it, When Competence Meets Office Politics, 5 Governance Red Flags Everyone Sees but Avoids Naming. I did not name the company or any individual. I structured the post in 3 parts. Part 1, metrics to monitor when there's a personnel change, weekly churn, cohort satisfaction scores, response times to key clients, and the rate of missed service commitments. Part 2, harmful organizational habits, changing the responsible name on documents without notation, using company cards for personal expenses, rewriting plans without consulting the team directly facing clients. Part 3, clear working principles. Any decision touching the customer must have a specific owner. Expense report approvals must follow standards, and temporary appointees may not unilaterally extend authority beyond what's written. I included 2 sample charts with all identifying details removed, explaining how to read them and how to track change history. The post ended with 1 short line. Don't ask for a seat, build the table. I posted at 8 p.m., turned on moderated comments to avoid falling into personal spats. I received a few responses from former colleagues at other companies. They talked about similar situations and how they kept their numbers clean. I thanked each person, keeping an even tone. Around 9 p.m., Margaret called to confirm she had sent the updated packet to the board chair. The 1-page summary, the consolidated index table, access logs, time-stamped bank statements, and excerpts of internal conflict of interest policies. Stay silent until Monday, she reiterated. The board wants to proceed by the book. I replied, understood. I set the phone down, cleared the table, washed the glasses, and dimmed the lights. I wanted to go to bed early, but there was one thing left: speak plainly at home. On the night of day 3, Carter walked into the kitchen at 10:30. He pulled out a chair, didn't turn on the main lights, only the under-cabinet glow. He spoke first. I can fix this. Sloan will step back. You'll step back in. He tried to keep his voice normal as if this were a minor adjustment. I didn't let the conversation loop. I said briefly, I've signed with North River. I won't trade the truth for a seat. He frowned. You really want to push this far? I shook my head. I'm not pushing. I'm doing what's right. The file has gone to the board. I'll present it as shareholder risk. I won't talk about personal life. He shifted tone. I did everything to protect us. You know the situation. It had to be this way for now. Lily stood at the doorway, having heard everything. She looked her father in the eye. Calling coercion protection may sound academic, but it's not right. I want you to stop. Carter was silent for a while. He looked over at me. I don't want to lose the family. I answered, if you don't want to, you know what to stop. Let process handle the work part. I didn't raise my voice or lower it. I spoke so it could be heard. The conversation ended there. Lily said goodnight and went upstairs. Carter went into the study. I cleared the dishes, locked the back door, checked my document bag, and set it next to my coat. Before bed, I checked email one last time. The North River offer had arrived in my new work inbox. The onboarding schedule included the video meeting link, the list of people to meet, product briefs, customer policy, and a list of open projects. I marked them red and created a new folder for next week. I checked the LinkedIn post. It had over 1,000 views after 2 hours, a few valuable comments, and a few private messages requesting sample materials. I replied, I'll send the checklist after Monday. I powered down and set the phone to silent. Early the next morning, before the board meeting, I wrote a short email to my former team. I won't be directly involved in decisions this coming week. Please send all requests to Sloan. I will hand over full documentation on Monday morning per HR guidance. Wishing everyone success in meeting our customer commitments. I didn't state any reasons. I didn't want the team pulled into a conflict zone. I attached a general, non-confidential document. Common customer questions during personnel changes. I then turned off unnecessary notifications one by one, keeping only the board meeting, the call with Margaret, and the Sunday night flight to Denver. At noon on day 3, Marcus sent a welcome message in North River's Slack. The content was clear. Introduced my name, my first 3-month remit, scope of decision rights, and direct support contacts. I read it and felt lighter. Not because of the greeting, because the lines describing the remit were clear. I replied, see the team Monday. I'll bring 2 working frameworks, customer care by response milestones, and a retention plan for the 3 accounts I can bring. Marcus reacted with a thumbs up. I closed Slack and returned to board prep. I printed an extra copy of a 30-day action summary for the old company to hand over as a final responsibility. Restore customer response processes, review all yellow flag accounts, halt non-purpose spending, review document permissions, and set up a working channel with key clients to resolve backlogs. In the afternoon, I received a few messages from former colleagues asking if I was okay. I replied, I'm okay. We'll see each other around the industry. I didn't comment on anyone. I didn't add more details. I knew every line could be forwarded. I focused on the remaining work, ordering the documents for presentation, checking my laptop battery, checking the printouts, checking my pens. I set an alarm for Monday morning an hour earlier. I texted Lily my flight time, the pickup in Denver, and the hotel name. She texted back, I'll take you to the airport. The night ended quietly. No arguments, no long messages. I locked the doors, checked the windows, and turned off the kitchen lights. Lying down, I thought about late afternoon on day 2. A concise call, a timely signature, a clear post. I also thought about the night of day 3, a brief conversation, a clear answer. That sequence of decisions created a concrete path. The new berth was open and the way to address the outside was set. I went to sleep early, knowing that the next morning I only needed to do my part. Bring the documents into the room, present shareholder risk with numbers and policy, then walk out. After that, I would fly to Denver to start the new week. I didn't look back at the old chair. I brought my client list, a few clean folders, and one principle. Don't ask for a seat. Build the table yourself. After the night of day 3, when I had signed the new contract and locked down all documents, this morning I woke early, checked my inbox, opened my phone, and saw the most important thing. The clients had spoken clearly. From here, I no longer need any additional explanation, only to bring their exact words to the right table. At around 7:30, Horizon Freight sent an official letter on their letterhead, signed by the Vice President of Operations. The first sentence was very direct. If Morgan leaves, we will terminate the contract under the clause permitting it. They listed the reasons. Recent handoff milestones have been delayed, the acting team responds slowly, and they want the person in charge present in the weekly reviews. I downloaded the letter and placed it in the folder for the board. 15 minutes later, Alder and Vine Hotels sent a shorter letter. We want Morgan to be directly in charge, at least through the end of the quarter. If there is a change in personnel, we request a meeting to realign the scope of work. Prairie Mutual sent a measured email. In this sensitive period, we propose keeping Morgan as the point of contact until the metrics return to a stable level. I replied to all three using the same template, confirming receipt of their requests and stating I would send a detailed service continuity plan by end of day. I did not promise anything beyond my authority. I simply kept to the working habits that have kept things on time for many years. By 8:30, a smaller client, though influential in the industry, also sent a note. We need to know who has ultimate responsibility for the contract. Recent calls have left us confused. I added this note to the reputational risk section. I called Margaret to report that letters had arrived from 3 major entities and 1 smaller one, all naming me directly. She said, "Submit verbatim. Do not soften into a summary." I nodded, forwarded her the originals, and marked them red in the system. I opened the consolidated sheet and added a new column. Client feedback in chronological order, signatory, main content, specific request. I left their language intact, unedited. When clients speak up, the boardroom often listens much faster than when internal staff argue. Before 10, I got a call from Horizon's project team. They asked about the possibility of arranging an urgent meeting with a decision maker. I said 3 p.m. could work, and I would send the meeting link right after finishing the presentation to the board. I noted the topics they wanted to discuss: resetting the delivery schedule, checking the readiness of the support team, and confirming the notification process for changes. Everything was clear, with no roundabout wording. Around 10:30, I arrived at headquarters. I brought printed client letters, the consolidated metrics sheet, and the document packet finalized on day 2. I met Harold in the hallway outside the meeting room. He asked, "What are the clients saying?" I handed him the 1-page summary. He read quickly, nodded, and said, "Put it in the opening." I entered the room 5 minutes early, checked the projector, tested slide transitions, and placed a spare pen within reach. I opened the first slide titled Shareholder Risk Overview with 4 groups beneath: revenue, reputation, compliance, operations. I decided to start with the clients' voices instead of charts. The meeting began on time. I stood at the head of the table, looked around once, and chose an even tone. I am not asking for my position back. I am presenting shareholder risk. I put 3 letters from Horizon, Alder and Vine, and Prairie Mutual on the screen. I read exactly 1 sentence from each. Horizon says, "If Morgan goes, we go." Alder and Vine says, "We want Morgan directly." Prairie Mutual says, "Keep Morgan until the metrics stabilize." I continued. Since the clients have said this, I propose we look at the accompanying numbers. The next slide showed the metrics. Customer churn up 18.7% in the past 90 days. Customer satisfaction down 21 points. Average response time up to 24 hours for major accounts. 17 strategic documents had their author information changed in the last 30 days. I presented each item, specifying source, timestamp, approver, and impact. I did not name anyone beyond what the documents already named. Carter spoke when I paused to change slides. "You're overdramatizing a transition period," I replied. "A transition does not change author information in the system." Sloane spoke softly, looking down at her computer. "We've been working nights to meet deadlines. Projected returns will—" She faltered. I didn't interject. Harold looked toward the company's counsel, then stated clearly, "Mr. Lang, temporary suspension of approval authority during the investigation. Ms. Avery, halt approval authority for spending and documents until conclusions are reached." He assigned internal audit to engage and requested the secretary record this in the minutes. I continued with solutions. "I will send service continuity plans for each account before 5 p.m. I displayed a sample page for Horizon, this week's meeting schedule, the name of the primary responsible person, committed response times, the after-hours support line, and a list of items to be completed within 7 days. I did the same for Alder and Vine and Prairie Mutual, stating only the structure and principles, not digging into internal detail since that's operations. I propose restoring the prior customer response standards immediately over the next 30 days, while reviewing all document access permissions and stopping changes to the named responsible party without notification. I added a proposal to pause non-work-related spending during the investigation to avoid legal risk. I attached to each proposal the department that could execute and a clear deadline. A board member asked, "If we keep you as the point of contact during the transition, is continuity assured?" I answered, "Yes. If decision rights within the customer service scope are temporarily given to the responsible team, and if the prior acting authority does not intervene in day-to-day decisions." I did not ask for anything for myself. I simply described how the work could proceed without disruption. Company counsel proposed immediately forming a short-term task force with representatives from internal audit, legal, and operations to handle each item. Harold agreed, appointed a long-standing EVP to support, and scheduled the first report in 48 hours. I provided the documents grouped as prepared: financial and operational metrics, evidence from former staff, and relevant internal policy excerpts. I reiterated that the electronic files had been time-stamped and sent to the board prior to the meeting. Carter asked to add a comment. He said his goal was to protect the company and that he wanted a solution that would not affect the overall image. Harold cut in. "We are talking about facts and contracts. The image will improve on its own when steps are done correctly." Sloane remained silent. I saw the secretary writing faster. I closed with a short summation. "If we put clients and data first, the remaining decisions will clarify themselves. I will send detailed plans for each account before 5 p.m. today." After I sat down, the board went into a 15-minute closed session. I waited in the hallway, double-checked my meetings with Horizon at 3, Alder and Vine at 4, and Prairie Mutual at 4:45. Harold stepped out and announced the interim decisions as he had stated in the room. Suspension of certain authorities, activation of internal audit, and a requirement that all communications with major clients go through the designated channel. He added, "We appreciate the clear presentation that goes straight to the metrics and contracts." I nodded and said nothing more. I went into a small side room and immediately sent the service continuity plans to the 3 clients as promised, including the name of the new temporary contact and the support line. I sent a short note to my former team. "Plans for the 3 major accounts have been sent. If you have questions, contact me between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. I did not let anyone get stuck between decisions. The lunch period ended with a series of acknowledgments of receipt from all 3 clients. Horizon replied that they would keep the contract and await an update in 7 days. Alder and Vine proposed an in-person review next week. Prairie Mutual requested a weekly tracker of 4 objectives for this month. I added each appointment to specific dates and times, tagged the responsible person, and set reminders. I did not feel relieved for winning a round. I simply felt the work had proceeded in the right order. Clients spoke, the board made decisions, and the execution steps were placed on the calendar. The rest was to get it done properly before 5 p.m., exactly as I had said in the meeting room. After I sent the 3 plans to the clients and received all 3 confirmation emails, that night I shut down my computer and slept through. The next morning, I opened my laptop at the small desk in my apartment, logged into my new North River account, and saw the first notification from Calvin. The 3 accounts have signed to transfer. I replied, received, took off my wedding ring, and put it in the drawer next to my notebook. On the screen, the display name showed only Morgan Ellis. That was enough. I scheduled short meetings with each team, confirmed response times, reminded everyone of the no email after 8 p.m. rule, and opened a dedicated channel for client questions in the first week. No slogans needed. Just do the right work at the right time. I drew out 5 principles to carry with me as a new working commitment. C1. Measure before you speak. Emotions are easy to dispute, but data can be checked. Every important meeting opens with metrics and the contract. 2. Identity is not the same as title. A seat can be taken, but your capability, process, and signature are yours to keep. 3. Ethics is a management tool. Disclose conflicts of interest, apply the same rules to everyone, no backdoors for the powerful. 4. Leaving is a skill. It isn't losing, it's reallocating the resources of your life to fit a place that respects you. 5. Clients are living proof of your value. Preserve your clients, and you preserve your voice. I printed those 5 lines and stuck them next to my screen so I'd see them every day when I started up. Around midday, I walked to the cafe down the street, opened my inbox, and replied one by one to messages from people who had followed the story these past few days. Some said they were being cut from a project just as they were up for promotion. Some said they were being told to wait for things to quiet down. I replied the same at the core. Check the data, keep a paper trail, stay calm, set a clear date to close. No one needs to shout. People need a clean set of documents and a clear working schedule. In the afternoon, I received a screenshot from a client. The news support channel works well. I nodded to myself, then went back to the next meeting on the calendar. On the day I was crossed off the promotion list, I didn't lose my voice. I just changed the room I spoke in. In places where capability is concealed by decisions made for appearances, you don't need noise. Let the data speak. Name your clients in the right places, sign contracts that respect you, and keep going. Thank you for listening to the story down to these final moments. Every view, a short comment, a timely share, all are encouragement, so those standing on the line know they're not alone. If the story touches you, save the safe work checklist, send it to someone who needs it, and leave a small story of your own in the comments. A number, a timestamp, a decision that brought you toward greater clarity. I am Morgan Ellis in Minneapolis. Don't ask for a seat. Build the table and sit at it under your own name.